best in his business to come up and admire the view while he unlocked his supply of whiskey. He offered it round with a leer that made me feel sick. There were tons of places in town you could buy liquor. Some of them had only boxes of tissues or cat food in the window, but everyone knew you couldn't run a specialist tissue shop. You only had to go a few paces in, past the Kleenex, and there were rows of Johnny Walker and Glenmorangie above the lager and Moroccan wine. Then my father told me to go and do some studying. Down in my room at the back of the house, I opened my books. I was studying economics, though studying may be too strong a word. True, I'd done well at school when I was young, but it was only because I was good at languages. I'd learned French from my mother, who was half French herself. Her father was from a French settler family in Algeria, one of those they called pieds noirs, or black feet, because the original ones, 100 years before, had had shiny leather shoes. Normally the generations of settlers married others of their own, French people, but my grandfather took a liking to an Algerian woman in Oran, Algerian granny, and they were married, though in what religion I don't know. They moved to Morocco and then to Paris, where my mother, whom they called Hanan, was born one day in the early 50s. I don't know why they had such itchy feet. Maybe they saw trouble coming in Algeria. I guess the Arab name was a gesture from my French grandfather to his Algerian wife now they were stuck in Paris. Hanan, any dictionary will tell you, means mercy or clemency, so maybe he was trying to be nice. It was in Paris that Hanan, my mother, was brought up, and where perhaps she should have stayed. But in her early 30s, she went to Morocco on a visit to some cousins, and it was there she had the misfortune to meet and marry Malik Zafar, a would-be businessman who, in 1986, became my father. My mother died when I was 10, or maybe I was 9. I wasn't aware at the time how ill she was and went off to school one day telling her I hoped her cold would be better by the evening. She did look thin and had trouble speaking. I was later told she had had cancer of the esophagus, though I hardly knew what either word meant. Her legacy was my ability to speak French. For a time, I went to the American school of Tangier, where the lessons were all in English and the girls wore Western clothes. There were daily doses of classical Arabic as well, but it got too expensive for the son of a flaky businessman. I was sent instead to a school in the Ville Nouvelle, where I got distracted, stopped reading and only just scraped into college at the end of it. And at college there were more girls. There was also a woman who taught politics, Miss Aziz. She had hair so black it had the purple glow in the light that came through the lecture room windows. It was thick with a slight wave, chopped off just above the shoulder. Like other women, she wore trousers most of the time, but once she wore a black skirt to the knee with a white shirt and 3 rows of big red beads. Towards the end of class, I noticed that a thin strip of white lace had slipped below the hem of the skirt and settled on the black nylon that covered her legs. We were all majoring in economics. It was a dull subject, but my father made me do it. Miss Aziz's politics class was a compulsory module in the course, and it had a bit of history in it too. One day she told us about the wars of the last century and how the Europeans came to North Africa. She talked about the colonizers as though she wasn't sure they were quite human. They were cultured, all right, the way she told it, but they were addicted to killing in a way that no number of symphonies could make up for. All this was new to me. I didn't know exactly when the Europeans had first come to my country or what they wanted from us, but they'd left a lot behind in the names of boulevards, squares, and churches. Listening to Miss Aziz describe the Spanish and the French as creatures of a slightly different species, I wondered if this was how they'd seen us too when they first arrived in North Africa. Our primitive bandits on a coastal strip above an endless desert. Bandits with religion. Miss Aziz, at first glance, seemed to do the right things. She was patient with the questions of the class, and when Dr. Ahmed, the head of department, put his head around the door and asked her for a word, she placed her book face down on the desk and hurried after him. But what was different about her was that she seemed to carry a world in her head that was not the world we knew. She never returned an essay late, and she was polite to Hamid, the toothless janitor who swept the courtyard while the rest of us just laughed at his fat ass when he wasn't sitting on it. And I can't imagine Miss A ever raised her voice in the staff room. So why did she give off this sense of rebellion? Layla, my girlfriend, noticed the same thing. She used to call Miss Aziz the messenger. It was the name of an American television show in which an average family had adopted a boy who turned out to be an alien. It was a comedy aimed at children, but it was a cult at our college. The kids in the family were always begging to be taken away to his home planet, but the messenger, who was like an ordinary boy...